the Viceroy, Mike Davis, tells me, since it doesn't actually say consecutive, that, I don't know, maybe we do it again in 28.
That was Steve Bannon at the 112th Annual New York Young Republican Club Gala last Sunday. He was the chief executive officer of Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and was later appointed chief strategist and senior counselor to the president. Now, allegedly, Mike Davis, the former chief counsel for nominations to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley and founder of the Article 3 Project, told Bannon that the Constitution does not mention the word consecutive when it comes to term limits for the president, therefore allowing Donald Trump to run for a third term. And they are 100% correct. It does not mention the word consecutive. Does this mean Trump can run again in 2028? No. It always amazes me when politicians and people working in our government don't actually read the Constitution or know its contents, or other important American documents.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
That's okay though. That's what we do here on this channel. Read the document and understand it relative to what's happening in our government today. In order to fully understand why Donald Trump can't run for office in 2028, we need to review Article 2 of the Constitution and look carefully at Amendment 22. Are you ready to know more about this than senior counselors to the president? Let's get to it. Article 2 is one of 7 parts of the U.S. Constitution, specifically dedicated to the executive branch. What the requirements are to be president, what powers the president has, the election process, how long a term is, but no actual mention of term limits. That's right, the original U.S. Constitution does not cap presidential term limits. And this is pretty consistent throughout the whole document. There are no term limits for members of the House of Representatives, senators, Supreme Court justices, and yes, even the president. The framers of the U.S. Constitution did not include term limits for the presidency primarily because they believed that the system of checks and balances, combined with the electoral process, would naturally prevent the accumulation of excessive executive power. The framers believed that frequent elections and the ability of the people to vote would serve as an effective check on any president who sought to stay in office indefinitely. They assumed that the electorate would reject any leader who overstepped their authority. Hamilton writes in the Federalist Papers, "The service of a man who has conducted himself with fidelity and success in office is a valuable source of stability in the government. To deprive the community of the advantage of his experience, to banish him from the service of his country, would be to inflict a severe wound on the community itself." He's emphasizing the electoral process as a safeguard, trusting the voters to determine whether a leader is fit to continue. He believed this system would naturally balance power without arbitrary term limits. But Hamilton and the Federalists weren't the only ones at the Constitutional Convention. You see, there was this other group there that was strongly opposed to giving too much power to the national government. A group much bigger on states' rights and the rights of the people. These were the AntiFederalists, the one who refused to sign the Constitution unless a Bill of Rights was added. I feel like the Anti-Federalists need their own walk-on music, like in the WWE, because these guys are always crashing the nonsense party with real concerns about government abuse. So cool. The Anti-Federalists strongly opposed the absence of presidential term limits in the original Constitution, arguing that it created the potential for abuse of power, corruption, and even the rise of a de facto monarchy. Their concerns centered on issues of human nature, the consolidation of power, and the lack of checks on the executive branch. They worried that without term limits, a president could consolidate power indefinitely, effectively becoming a monarch. This concern was rooted in their experience under British rule and their desire to avoid anything resembling the unchecked authority of a king. The re-election of the same individual repeatedly could enable them to entrench themselves in power, control appointments, and dominate the other branches of government. I love this quote from Cato's essay number 4. "The president will be generally directed by minions and favorites, or he will become a king, possessing most extensive powers and being uncontrolled by any branch of the legislature." They also believe that individuals in positions of power are naturally inclined to seek more power. It's just human nature. Without a mechanism like term limits, they argued the presidency could attract individuals motivated by ambition rather than public service. You see, unlimited eligibility for re-election could encourage presidents to prioritize personal or partisan interests over the public good, especially if they believe they could manipulate the system to remain in power indefinitely. They wrote about this at length in the Anti-Federalist Papers number 70. The Anti-Federalists also believed that other parts of the Constitution, such as impeachment or reliance on elections, were insufficient checks on executive overreach. This was actually one of their major concerns throughout the entire document. Like, are you sure these checks and balances will work? They argued that impeachment would rarely succeed due to political interests, and that the Electoral College could be manipulated to re-elect a president indefinitely. Now, we know how this story ends. They ultimately were persuaded to agree with unlimited government terms. They were probably convinced that George Washington, the de facto executive leader of choice, would likely set a precedent for stepping down voluntarily after a reasonable period, which he did when he declined to run for a third term. After some time, it just became customary for popular presidents to step down after their second term and not run again. Customary, but not actually what the document stated as a restriction. And so the Anti-Federalist looked really foolish about worrying over nothing, and that's where the story ends. And then came along Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He did not follow Washington's precedent. FDR's first term began in 1933, during the Great Depression, when the U.S. was facing severe economic hardship. His New Deal programs aimed at relief, recovery, and reform were widely popular and helped alleviate the worst effects of the Depression. His leadership during this time gained him immense support from voters who felt that only he could manage the crisis. This is also one of the two pivotal moments in U.S. history where the federal government assumed an absurd amount of power, to which it has yet to relinquish. But we'll save that video for another day. By the time of his second term, the world was on the brink of World War II. Roosevelt's decision to support Allied nations, particularly Britain, before officially entering the war, helped him build a reputation as a strong international leader. And then he decided to do what no other person had done before him. He ran for a third term and won. With the outlook of World War II looking more and more like the U.S. would join the fight, FDR ran for re-election and the people let their voices be heard. He won 55% of the popular vote and became the first person to serve 3 terms as president. When the U.S. entered the war in 1941 after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt's wartime leadership helped unite the nation and solidify his popularity. His handling of the war effort, along with his vision for post-war peace, kept him in favor with the public. And then he did it again. He won his 4th consecutive presidential election. Now, although he died 82 days into his 4th term from a brain hemorrhage, it's unclear if he would have run a 5th time to help keep world peace and rebuild after World War II. He was only 63 when he died. It's not outside the realm of possibility for him to run again, although his margin of victory in each presidential election had declined since his complete and total destruction of his opponent for his second term. Either way, his extended time in office raised concerns about the possibility of a president becoming too powerful, particularly because the presidency was meant to be limited in power by the Constitution. Roosevelt's leadership during the Great Depression and World War II, while widely praised, also fueled fears of an overly dominant executive branch. Critics argued that such extended power could lead to tyrannical tendencies. His death in office in 1945, after serving more than 12 years as president, brought the issue to the forefront, prompting a public debate about limiting presidential terms. This brought about the 22nd Amendment, or change to the U.S. Constitution, which was proposed and passed in Congress in 1947, just a little over 2 years after his passing. I'm pausing for effect here. 2 years to write, propose, and pass to the states the 22nd Amendment. That's unheard of. The turnaround time from something happening, the government reacting, and the government doing something as far as changing the Constitution. Ask the 19th Amendment how it feels about that. Okay, so let's actually read the amendment. Section 1. No person shall be elected to the office of the President more than twice, and no person who has held the office of President or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the office of the president more than once. But this article shall not apply to any person holding the office of president when this article was proposed by Congress, and shall not prevent any person who may be holding the office of president or acting as president during the term within which this article becomes operative from holding the office of president or acting as president during the remainder of such term. Section 2. The article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, within 7 years from the date of its submission to the states by the Congress. That's it. 165 words total, but really 58 actual words on the new restrictions to presidential term limits. So, as we can see, the word consecutive does not appear. Neither does the word horse or chair, but I digress. It's rare that the Constitution is so plain in its wording. No person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. I'm not a math person. I wish math was my thing, but I was a weirdo and liked history and government in school. I blame my awesome social studies teachers, but I will attempt to explain this mathematically. The number 2 represents 2 units of 1. Whether or not the units are consecutive or apart, the value does not change. It's always just 2. And any additional unit added, whether consecutive or not, will always be more than 2. More than or greater than 2 represents all numbers that hold more units than 2. You see, I'm already boring myself talking about numbers. Mike Davis, Steve Bannon, some remedial mathematics goes a long way. The only thing that's really, and this is a stretch, vaguely unclear is the portion of the 22nd Amendment surrounding the acting as president for more than 2 years portion. For any VP that has to officially assume the presidency, whether that is from a president dying, becoming incapacitated, or unfit to perform the presidential duties, or impeachment, the VP becomes acting president for the remainder of the presidential term. You can find more info on this in some weird 25th Amendment scenarios in my video at the top of your screen. Anyways, the 22nd Amendment does allow a vice president who became president to serve less than 2 years to be elected as president twice. This would, in effect, prevent any one person from being the president more than 10 years total. Theodore Roosevelt was vice president when McKinley was assassinated and ended up serving 3 full years as acting president. Now, had the 22nd Amendment been active during this time, Teddy would have been eligible to win only one more presidential election, since he had served as acting president for more than 2 years. And that's how it's designed to work nowadays. The idea behind the 22nd Amendment is to prevent any one individual from holding the presidency for too long and potentially establishing a de facto dictatorship. By limiting presidents to 2 terms, the amendment aims to maintain a healthy balance of power between the executive and the other branches of government. It also turns Washington's long-standing decision to step down after 2 terms into codified law. And there you have it. An extremely long-winded answer and explanation to a simple question, using the actual Constitution and its amendments to verify. Because Donald Trump has won 2 presidential elections, the 22nd Amendment forbids him from running again. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. We'll make more videos soon.